As I say, this kind of conditionality that we had was effective in bringing an end to the apartheid situation. The task of BDS is to make negotiations actually possible between Israelis and Palestinians, and they have a lot more in common than we had in South Africa. It's how best to describe it. I'm hopeful that they will find each other. They will both make a huge contribution. Israelis and Palestinians will make a huge contribution in the Middle East and beyond. The peace process, as we know, has been a complete farce. And it's time for the international community, and particularly civil society. Governments are part of the problem and not part of the solution. It was civil society. You remember the movement that we mobilized in the States in particular during the 1980s of universities and students and trade unions and churches. And that really was the support network that we garnered to overcome the apartheid system. We could not have done it domestically without the support of the international community. And that applies as well in Israel and Palestine. And so this brings me back to divestment. Elbit, together with 70 Israeli companies, are listed on NASDAQ. They are flouting arms embargoes in terms, for instance, of Myanmar. There's a US arms embargo on exports of weapons to Myanmar. There's a European arms embargo on exports of weapons to Myanmar and other countries. They flout it, and they'll say it's national security. They close their eyes to bribery and money laundering. Money laundering and bribery is now considered a fairly consequential security issue worldwide. I would hope that in this country you can mobilize to target those Israeli companies that are very much part of the Israeli war business. Because they are, and it's not just in terms of the international implications, the Israelis are now marketing their expertise of pacification of Palestinians in the United States, in the Ferguson and other police forces that are trained by the Israelis on pacification. So you have a domestic issue, and you're seeing the consequences in the United States of this mentality of, and what the Israelis market is of their weapons battle-tested and proven on Palestinians. I hope we can find a means both within the United States and internationally, to bring this menace to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan?
Is this on?
Should be.
Okay. Hello, is it on? Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. That was quite inspiring. Well, you heard earlier from Lindsay that more than half of the discretionary congressional budget was Pentagon spending, some 55%, total $1.17 trillion, more than $600 billion a year. Tax dollars, our tax dollars, right? People's dollars. This year, Trump proposed major cuts in civilian programs to finance a $54 billion additional increase in this already bloated military budget. Then last week, the Armed Services Committee, led by John McCain, upped it even more. Enormous fraction of our national wealth that's politically controllable going to the military and the permanent war machine, right? And to do that, they have to starve every component of the civilian budget: housing, healthcare, Medicare, education, et cetera. Now, I want to, though it's not my topic, I just want to pick up or expand, Bruce, the last panel. The programming, hundreds of thousands of people have marched all over the country in defense of Medicare. Why isn't there enough money for health care? Because of that $600 billion budget. But is that part of that movement? No, we don't hear health care, not warfare, right? What we need is those major movements fighting for Social Security, fighting for health care, fighting for education, to recognize that the only way they're going to get those campaigns. What they need is to cut the military budget. Now, taxing billionaires would help too. You probably have to do both. So in our Massachusetts Peace Action nuclear disarmament campaign, we're very clear. We start off with the social need. Build housing, not bombs. Subways, not submarines. Healthcare, not warfare. And we don't invite the housing activists to come to our meetings because they won't. They're in a crisis over losing their housing, right? We try to go to their meetings and say, well, with you, why in the wealthiest country on earth isn't there enough money for housing? It's because they're building nuclear weapons. People listen, and if you get to show Lindsay's slide, right, people are blown away. I cannot tell you how many times I've put that slide up there, said half of the U.S. budget goes to weapons and it's your tax dollars, and people say, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I'm an educated person. If that was true, I would know that, right? You'll notice that no agency of the United States government, not the Congress, not the executive branch, not the IRS, writes back to you how your tax dollars are being spent. Everybody talks about paying income taxes, and nobody has a clue about how that money is spent. In Cambridge, city manager sends you a glossy booklet. How did they spend your property taxes? How much for schools? How much for fire? How much for police? Everybody reads it. I'm telling you, if the American people knew that more than half of their tax dollars was going to weapons, they'd have a little different attitude toward it. Now, among this enormous budget, buried in there because of secrecy, is the nuclear weapons program. The Congressional Budget Office estimates over the next 10 years maybe $300 or $350 billion on nuclear weapons. And you've heard that the administration is proposing this totally insane program of spending $1 trillion over the next 30 years, $1,000 billion on nuclear weapons. Due to the good work of Susi and her colleagues, we know the corporations that manufacture nuclear weapons and maintain them. There aren't that many. She says 27, but if you leave out the ones in Italy and India, it's about 20 in the US. If you want to know how come there's 99% and 1%, so taxes over the next 30 years collected from 99% of the population are going to go to 20 corporations who are going to get those contracts. All of you, because you're all my generation, you've heard all about nuclear deterrence and mutual assured destructions and the Ruskies and the Red Chinese. You know, there's a whole industry of keeping Americans confused about what's going on in nuclear weapons. But you never hear the names of the 20 corporations that are getting the super profits. And they make sure those profits, those contracts are monopoly contracts. You can't outsource it to the Chinese or the Mexicans or Indonesian, so there's no competition. They're cost plus by congressional decree, no matter how inefficient electric boat is. Now, they're not that inefficient, but how inefficient they might be in building the subs down in New London, they are guaranteed a set 8% profit on top of it. In fact, the more they spend on building the submarine, the more money they make on it. The third thing is there's no audits because of national security. It is impossible to find out how this money is actually spent. However, a few intrepid journalists, one thing it's clear is a significant fraction of the money we send to Lockheed Martin to build Trident missiles is recycled back to congressmen, to a number of journalists, to a number of academics who do studies on how the rogue nations are so dangerous and, you know, we couldn't give up our 5,000 nuclear weapons. That Armed Service Committee, the most best finance Congress people in the United States. They all get the maximum allowable from that industry. 700 full-time lobbyists, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars in lobbying fees. And then to the communities, jobs for the members of the family and the staff. We have Raytheon in, well, I have to watch the time here, right? And stick to my subject. Okay, so it is clear that companies like Lockheed Martin make a fortune from the contracts. You can't get the details, but their annual reports to their investors talk about it. We were trying to find out how much one new Ohio-class submarine would cost. You know, you go through all those government documents in the Department of Defense, and we couldn't find it. Then it turned out the congressman in that district put out a press release that he had brought $1.6 billion to Electric Boat for an Ohio class, not even for building it, for the design and the early steps. Now, let me just remind you, the U.S. has 14 Ohio class submarines. Everyone has at least 100 independently targetable warhead, 12 missiles, each one has 8 independently targeted warhead. Every one of those warheads 20 to 50 times more powerful than the bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. One sub launching can destroy, obliterate every city of any country on earth, Russia, China, India. And yet we have 14 of them, thousands of missiles. It is totally insane. It has nothing to do with national security. It's the mechanism to keep those corporations raking in the dough and keep everybody else, you know, in a fog over it. Do these weapons give us any security? Did it really keep the North Koreans? Did it save the Russians from the Chechen terrorists, the British from Argentina? No, nothing. You can't use these weapons, right? They don't get you to work. You can't build anything with it. They don't house you. They don't close you. And they don't bring national security and national defense. It is probably, in my estimation, the largest and deepest boondoggle in human history, right? That much of our national wealth has put toward a situation where one accident and the world is done. Now, everybody, 70 years have gone by, and we still have them. Right? It's clearly a tough nut to crack. We got an enemy here who's very shrewd, very experienced, very wealthy, got a lot of tools, and reversing it's not going to be easy. So one model we had was the boycott model, and I remember, and so do you, the Montgomery bus boycott. They knew that those companies depended on the black bus riders for their economic survival, and their original target was just to make the bus company give in. But as we all know, it got picked up on the news, and it turned out to be an extraordinary effective mechanism of educating other people on what was going on. I was a young MIT faculty when, it was a group of black employees at Polaroid Corporation in Cambridge. Polaroid was making the ID system that the apartheid regime used, and they wanted Polaroid to stop making it. And then we ended up having at MIT students and faculty brought together asking MIT to divest its holdings in corporations doing business in South Africa. Of course, the university resisted. I am sure that it was, for my colleagues who were biology faculty, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows, it was in that battle that they learned what apartheid was. They knew something bad was going on in South Africa, but it was a kind of very, very vague. So that turned out to be effective at many levels, directly, economically, and then remember the sports boycotts. Teams weren't, right, so that became very powerful. Well, a couple of years ago, a physics colleague who's very important in this work, Max Tegmarker, and I, we were at a conference in New York about nuclear weapons, and we sat through 40 talks, and none of the 40 people had any ideas, as far as we were concerned, about how you would do anything about this. They all gave very good talks, they're very knowledgeable, the weapons and the nuclear deterrence and this and that and the other thing. But Susi was there, and she described this economic campaign, don't bank on the bomb. And Max and I had a cup of coffee afterwards, and we said, those people got the right idea. You got to stigmatize this industry. But if Americans don't know that it's a business, if they just think that it's soldiers, sailors, and national security, we're not going to get very far. So we decided We're going to bring the Don't Bank on the Bomb campaign into the U.S. We were in Cambridge, so Cambridge seemed natural. Now, Cambridge isn't that much more liberal than any place else, right? It's not a university city, it's an industrial city. That's its history, right? It's diverse because there were jobs there, blue-collar jobs, and it's an immigrant population, still a big industrial town with the biotech industry and computer industry. But the community is very well organized around housing and things like that. So the beauty of the Don't Bank on the Bomb campaign doesn't take a whole lot of folks, right? If a municipality, Susie will talk to you about individual action. I want to talk about group actions. If a municipality has employees that had a pension fund, or a college or university has an endowment, and even churches have endowments, a small group of people can go to them and ask that they divest from those corporations that manufacture nuclear weapons. And the Future of Life Institute, I should have a flyer, they will tell you, you tell them what the town is or what the city or what the church is, and they'll tell you, you go to the website, and they'll tell you whether that pension fund owns companies making nuclear weapons. Well, the Cambridge Pension Fund owed Lockheed Martin, the leading nuclear weapons contractor in the United States, making the missile warheads and the missiles. And we went to the city council with a, a resolution. Actually, in Cambridge, it's an order. It's called an order. And we had a base in the community, so we didn't only had nuclear weapons people. I talked about affordable housing, and that was why we had a housing shortage. Other people talked about why we couldn't build a green line to Somerville, because they were building nuclear submarines, subways, not submarines. And we got the unanimous vote that the pension fund should divest. Now, that's just the first step, and other groups are going to start doing that, and I hope you'll go home and think about the same thing. Of course, the state has a law that says a local pension fund has to use various criteria. They can't use those criteria. But it turns out that there was a move to divest from tobacco industry years back, and it was done locally, and then in the state legislature, they overrode. So we have a model. We have to go back next year and launch a campaign in the state legislature to override and get the divestment. It gets publicity, right? And people learn, oh my God, there are these corporations making money off of making these weapons, right? It acts on people. My time is up. I want to come back to. Yes, it's up. It's up even on my timer. Must be true. I want to come back on, we do have this problem that the American people don't know how much permanent war costs, right? And we have to get this information in their hands. We have to get the kind of information that's on the NPP website, out much more broadly. And we have to make it clear that some people are making a buck off putting the whole world at risk, because honest folks get outraged when they learn about like that. It doesn't yet require winning a vote in the Congress. The last point I want to circle back to the first point I made. Yes, it would be better if the Bath Iron Works guys were making windmills. But all through Maine are people desperately in need of better health care, desperately worried about their social security, desperately not able to pay tuition for their kids to go to school. We need those people to understand that they need the conversion of the overall economy. It's not just the jobs in the defense industry. Those guys will fight to defend that to the end because of the lack of competition and the guaranteed wage. We have to get the broader society. So I didn't say anything about climate and environment. because my experience has been completely sad and negative. We have a very robust climate change movement in Massachusetts, 350.org. At MIT, we have a fossil fuel divestment movement with hundreds of students, and we have a conscious effort over the last couple of years to get them to take up at least nuclear winter. That's climate change. It's fast climate change. And we have not been able to do it. I was at the 200,000 people march in Washington, the last one. There was a little peace action delegation at the very end. I started off at the beginning, so I had to wait. And I watched 200,000 people march by. And I was waiting for a sign that said, protect the climate, no war. No, right? So that hasn't yet happened. Some of you are in communities where that possibility exists because you have relations or we don't have relations. I think that's part of our mission in the next year to come, is to make sure that the main line, to bring to the main line of the climate change movement, you cannot ignore the dangers, certainly nuclear weapons and nuclear winter. Thanks a lot.
Susie, your 15 minutes of fame.
Woohoo! I'm excited. All right. Hi, everybody. Hi. My name's Susi Snyder. You heard that before. Anybody here on Twitter? All right, great. You can always tweet at me. It's just at Susi Snyder. And you can always tweet about me, too. Totally fine with that. I'm a big fan of the social media because I think it has power to help us and power to make change. And I think that there are some things, despite what you may hear, we actually are kind of winning some things. And that's kind of cool. I know it's hard to see sometimes, but I see it happening. And I think that we need to build our efforts on the wins. We need to celebrate them, embrace them, do shots of tequila about them, whatever it is. But we need to really celebrate this because every time we have a winning campaign or a winning event or whatever it is, people stay around and help us through the not good times. And the first campaign I really got into, we won. And that was half my life ago. And I'm still around and still doing this because we won. And I knew that we could do it again. And last week we had a little bit of a win, or this past week. And so I want to start from there. And some of you, it's come up a couple of times. In this past year, countries, about 135 countries led by South Africa, among Ireland, Austria, banned nuclear weapons. Yeah. Come on. It's amazing. Yeah. This is, right now, this is amazing, especially because nuclear weapons are right at the top of the media agenda right now, because nuclear weapons are on everybody's mind because they are freaking terrifying, horrifying things, and there's a couple of dudes threatening each other with toys that could kill all of us. And so they're at the top of the agenda, and it's an opportunity for us to really push this. Why did they get banned? Because they're inhumane, because they cause catastrophic consequences, and because no one should have them. Yeah. But I'll tell you, they do have them. There's 9 countries that have them. We all know this. Jonathan alluded to it. I saw a terrifying statistic the other day that at every moment at sea, there's 700 times the entire firepower of the Second World War. The explosive power of the Second World War, including the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, times 700 at sea every moment. Okay, I'm not going to swear, but I want to, and every time I see something like that, I really want to. And, I tried not to, so I won't swear, but we can all do it mentally. Now, there's this ban treaty. 53 countries signed it. 3 of them already ratified. Guyana in the Caribbean was the first one that just quickly and subtly deposited its instrument of ratification. It was amazing. Nobody saw it happen. We were all kind of like, what? Holy See ratified. Thailand ratified. We need another 47 until it becomes international law. And we'll get there. And the reason I'm so excited about this, I mean, I'm not seeing the US sign on to this treaty anytime soon. I'm also not seeing the US sign on to the Convention of the Rights of the Child.
Yeah.
Right? But let me tell you something. Child labor is outlawed in the US. The norm has power. The US isn't going to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty anytime soon. But I'll tell you what, it is certainly not going to test nuclear weapons because the norm has power, and this treaty establishes a norm. And I'm excited about that. Hopefully you share my excitement. It also gives us a huge opportunity. Now, I live in the Netherlands. It's a beautiful country, it's very flat. I've got lots of bicycles. Yes, you know, 16.5 million people, 33 or so million bicycles. I admit I contribute to that economy. I own 2 bicycles myself. You know, it's like we have a 4-bicycle family, right in the edge. But anyway, in the Netherlands, we've been doing some fun things with the banking industry and the pension fund industry, and we talked to them about weapons. And around Europe, we talked to the banking industry, banks, pension funds, investment firms, like asset managers. And what we do is we talk to them about weapons and why they should not allow our money to be invested in weapons. This new ban treaty prohibits assistance with the manufacture and production of nuclear weapons. Right? Yeah. During the negotiations, about 20 countries made it really clear. To them, assistance also includes investment. This is giving us a really good hook. Now, no one should profit from making horrible weapons. And that's what investment is. It's not buying something from the company. It's investing so that you actually earn a profit off of what they produce. And so we're talking to the financial sector and saying, you know, you gotta stop doing this. Now, I see a lot of people in here who probably have investment retirement accounts, pension funds. I'm not saying you shouldn't make money. You need to take care of yourself. I'm not condemning making money, all right? But we can do this in a way that does not profit off of industries that cause horrible, horrible apartheid, production of weapons. We shouldn't do that. So we have this campaign. It's called Don't Bank on the Bomb. You can check out our website, don'tbankonthebomb.com, don'tbankonthebomb.org. It's the same website. And in it, we go through 3 things. We go through the good, we go through the bad, and we go through the ugly. I'll start with the ugly. The ugly are the producers, the companies that are making these weapons. We lay out the information. Who has a 30-year contract to produce French missiles? It's on the website. You know, we talk about who's got the latest bids. What's going on with this? In the US here, it's primarily through 3 companies. It's Lockheed, it's Raytheon, and it's General Dynamics. And they have subsidiaries. And you heard Bruce in the previous panel talk about the Bath Iron Works, which is a subsidiary. We focus on the parent companies because we want banks and pension funds not to invest in the parents. They can't give money to their children. We talk about companies like AECOM, Babcock and Wilcox, Bechtel, Texas A&M University, University of California. They form a conglomerate that looks at that works on the US nuclear weapons complex. And they were fined for significant first-degree performance failures last year, but the contracts were not canceled. Right, that's a problem. So we talk about that. We put the information out there for people to use because you can't do anything without information. It is our power. It gives us our voice. That's the ugly. Talk about the ugly. Then we talk about the bad. We talk about the 200 or so US financial institutions that are profiting from this. And we, again, go to the mother company. So we talk about Bank of America. We don't necessarily talk about your local credit union that might be certified through Bank of America. And we don't talk about the specific mutual funds. We leave that to our wonderful colleagues at Future of Life Institute. We share the burden on this. But we talk about the bad, we talk about the investors. What I love about this campaign, though, is we talk about the good. We talk about those. We have now, in last year's report, we're in the middle of this year's report. It's like 10 months of research for every report. So we're in the middle of this year's report. And last year we found 54 financial institutions that have policies saying, nope, not gonna touch it. Not touching any sort of investment around nuclear weapons. And they specifically name nuclear weapons in their policies, which is pretty cool. And they're coming from about 18 countries, and we're picking that up. And it's something that anybody can work on. Anybody can do, and anybody can make change. I'll give you some examples. In Sweden, now Sweden's a quite progressive country. It's about 4 million people, and they're very happy, and it's dark there in the winter, and everybody's got candles, and eats really good soup and good bread, and we love the Swedes. They're very cuddly. Yeah, and in Sweden, we did, put some information out to the press, and because of that, a couple of people got really upset. Sorry, I was looking for the right word. Upset that their bank, that Swedbank, was connected to nuclear weapon producers. And they were like, this is not Swedish. I don't know if you know about Sweden. Sweden has a feminist foreign policy right now. Sweden is actually upholding its agreements under the Arms Trade Treaty and not selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. And it's one of the biggest weapons producers in the world. Right? Because that stuff's not Swedish. So these people, they were very upset, and it was not very many of them. And they posted some stuff on the Facebook wall of Swedbank. And Swedbank was like, uh-oh, uh-oh, we're gonna, uh-oh. Their communications department got like in a flurry, and they were like really upset. And then one person in their corporate social responsibility department, which is 2 people, was like, okay, I'm gonna fix this. And so Amanda Jackson, you're awesome. And she wrote a policy. It took her a little bit of time, but she got a policy through, and Swedbank does not invest in nuclear weapon producers anymore. It's really cool. But seriously, it was like 3 people posting on a Facebook page. And again, Sweden is small. Sweden is not that big. Belgium's a little bit bigger. And in Belgium, they are so mad at me because I couldn't include them in last year's report, but this KBC bank, changed their policy because we put out a big op-ed in a Belgian newspaper, and we said, this bank invests and is profiting off of weapons of terror. And we really blew it up, And so this is not a good thing. And so KBC Bank contacted me directly, and we're like, no, we're not. We said, well, yeah, you are. And we showed them the report. We was like, yeah, you are. And they said, well, no, we're not. And then I said, well, prove it. Make a policy. Do something. So they did. And this year we'll be featuring KBC as somebody with a policy that doesn't invest in weapons of mass destruction. It's really cool. Again, this is, we use the press, and we don't use necessarily big press, because it's not New York Times that's covering